Faith-based films being the hot new trend in indie filmmaking was not on my bingo card this year, but that's all right. Cultural trends are funny. Sometimes things will stay the same for years and years, and then out of nowhere they can just flip around. Like, for most of my life, faith-based films and TV shows have been pretty dreadful. They tended to be boring, predictable, and too concerned with being proper. The acting was usually stiff, and they were never funny. But faith-based filmmakers seem to have finally figured out that you can tell stories which are respectful to religion and people of faith, and more interesting than watching paint dry. I'm not the kind of person who actively looks for faith-based films to watch, but in the last year, I've just found myself over and over stumbling across films that maybe weren't necessarily made for me, but are so good and interesting that I want to talk about them. Last year, I couldn't stop raving about the best Christmas pageant ever, and I was pleasantly surprised by King of Kings. Both of these films were excellent adaptations of books written for children, and I think whether or not you're a Christian, you can enjoy them. I may possibly be adding The Promised Land to this list. I say possibly because only the first few episodes of the show have come out, and time will tell if it can pull off its interesting but risky concept. When I heard that Old Testament stories were going to be filmed in a mockumentary style reminiscent of The Office, I was skeptical. But The Promised Land seems to have been made by people who understand how to make the story of the Hebrews' 40 years in the wilderness relatable to modern viewers. You really could tell the story of Moses as a workplace drama. Getting the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land is a story of leadership, organizational management, logistics, and a lot of interpersonal conflict. The pilot episode begins at chapter 18 of the biblical book of Exodus, giving a brief backstory on how the Hebrews managed to get out of Egypt. Moses is leading the Hebrews with the goal of getting to the Promised Land, but for now they're living in tents in the wilderness, and the episode neatly introduces the main cast and lays out plot threads for coming episodes. One character I instantly latched onto was an Egyptian soldier who accidentally found himself on the wrong side of the Red Sea after the waters came rushing in. And so now he's in disguise trying to blend in with the Israelites, even though he doesn't speak Hebrew very well. He's got the wrong accent. He doesn't know what tribe he belongs to. And so they've kind of set up this really fun cat and mouse situation where this one guy's like, yeah, I'm kind of suspicious of you. And you can see how that's going to play out in a lot of hilarious ways over the series. At the beginning of the show, Moses is having trouble as a leader because he's trying to do everything himself. Then his father-in-law Jethro shows up, bringing his wife and kids. Jethro's dismayed by what he sees, and Moses gets frustrated by what he sees as an encroachment on his authority. In a parallel struggle, Moses' sister Miriam feels threatened by Zipporah, who's not only the wife of the prophet, but radiates energy and confidence. Which, as any self-doubting introvert will know, is incredibly annoying. Moses is a likable but flawed boss, constantly calling his junior assistant Joshua by the wrong name, and remaining oblivious when the others around him are frustrated by his micromanaging. It's impossible not to draw parallels to the character of Michael Scott from The Office, who somehow managed to be both frustrating and endearing. Episode 2 shows how a new endeavor can quickly descend into petty bickering. Jethro convinces Moses to delegate out authority, so all of the Israelites are divided into groups of 10, 50, 100, and 1,000. And of course, the guys who get put in charge of larger groups are very happy about that. And then the guy who only gets a group of 10 is extremely annoyed and resentful and I'm capable of doing so much more and this organization doesn't appreciate me. And so it's funny how the way that they set that up, it's so relatable in a modern context. It can feel very alien when you're reading about ancient cultures, but this kind of interpersonal conflict where, the boss doesn't appreciate me or someone overestimates their leadership skills and has a massive ego and then just makes everything awful for everyone else in the workplace, that's something that I feel like is a very universal human trait, and the show was really smart to hone in on this. When Monty Python's Life of Brian came out in 1979, it was wrongly labeled as a blasphemous attack on religion. But as the Pythons themselves pointed out, the movie was quite respectful of religion itself. What it did was hold up a mirror to the imperfections of people trying to follow their faith. The Life of Brian didn't spend 40 years in the wilderness, but in the 4 decades since its release, popular culture has come around to see that humor that skewers human fallibility is not the same thing as a mean-spirited attack on faith itself. The Promised Land was able to launch without any controversy because of the trail blazed by Monty Python. This isn't a show about mocking religion or faith. This is a show about having a good laugh at ourselves. Most faith-based filmmakers take their projects way too seriously. There's either no humor in their projects, or the humor that's in there just feels really fake and forced because they're not willing to do anything edgy at all. On the flip side, if everything is a gag, a project can lack heart. The Promised Land starts out with what could be a comedy sketch, showing how Moses is getting pretty tired from having to hold up his staff all day to ensure that the Hebrews were successful in a battle. Something like this is great as a one-off, but it's not substantial enough to build an entire television series on. But luckily, the plot quickly moved on to character development and interpersonal drama, which can really set up something that will last quite a lot longer. The filmmakers wisely made the choice to take the show directly to YouTube, where it's able to reach its target audience without requiring a streaming subscription. Bypassing the Hollywood pipeline also meant that the filmmakers didn't have to waste time dealing with studios that were very unlikely to greenlight a Bible-based project, even though it had a racially diverse cast, positively portrayed interracial marriage, and substantially expanded roles for female characters far beyond what was in the original text. If you're a fan of dry bar comedy or the Babylon Bee, this show is for you. I don't think younger children will like it, but teenagers will appreciate its humor. While the Old Testament wasn't written as a children's book, I think it's safe to say that plenty of kids have read the Bible over the years, so that's why I decided to review The Promised Land and give it a Snape score. For on-screen adaptations of children's books, I award from 1 to 5 Snapes, not based on how good I thought a film or TV show was, but rather how accurately it interprets the source material. Unsurprisingly, the filmmakers followed the events of the Book of Exodus pretty closely. It's so detailed that it correctly describes manna, food sent from heaven, as something that isn't eaten directly but is first gathered and then baked. Episode 2 follows chapter 19 of Exodus quite precisely. Everyone has to wash their clothes. Moses is called to Mount Sinai by the sound of a trumpet. And there's a temporary prohibition on marital hanky-panky. But the show isn't trying to only reproduce exactly what's in the Old Testament. The Bible is not a close character study because it's a sweeping epic, and it's not funny. And no, I don't want to hear any snark about Proverbs 21:9. The Promised Land expands the source material by a lot, but it's done very thoughtfully. The only areas that strained credibility for me had to do with the female characters. Both Miriam and Zipporah can read and write, which seems pretty unlikely for that time period, and Moses explicitly makes Miriam the leader of all the women, which isn't in the Bible at all. While, of course, women in ancient Hebrew society did have their own way of doing certain things, and some of them did gain positions of prominence, we are still talking about an ancient patriarchal society in which men govern both the family and society at large. And I'm using the word patriarchal in its technical sense of the word, not in the way people with nose rings mean it. Of course, Miriam is an important figure, but in the Bible, she never has a formal leadership role. If anything, she experiences a little bit of fool around and find out when she questions the authority of her brother Moses and gets smote with some leprosy. Yeah, that's a spoiler, but the book's been out for like 2,500 years. I give The Promised Land 3 Snapes, because the show is pretty much telling the story that's in the Book of Exodus, but with a whole lot of extra interesting character development built on top of it. I'm curious to see how this show does. I'll admit I have a bit of a soft spot for independent filmmakers, especially ones that use practical sets, real costumes, and hardly any special effects. The Promised Land is going to make or break based on its writing and the chemistry between the actors. So far, I'm seeing a very well-known story retold with warmth, wit, and a fresh point of view, and I want to watch more. Let me know if you want me to review individual episodes of The Promised Land, or if you'd rather that I just come back and talk about the whole season once it's concluded. And if you're interested in more reviews of faith-based films by someone who isn't a churchgoer but just appreciates good storytelling, please check out my reviews of King of Kings and The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. And as always, thanks for listening.